Alright, so in this particular problem, what we want to do is we want to solve by the quadratic formula. Again, we can't use solving by square roots. We might be able to factor this. We can't complete the square because of this number here, because of the coefficient. So the only, aside from factoring, the only other way we could do this problem is the quadratic formula. So in order to do the quadratic formula, we want to get everything to one side. So I'm going to move the -1 over here. And so what that does is it tells me that A has to equal 5, B has to equal -6, and C has to equal 1. Okay, so everything has to be on one side of the equal sign. It doesn't matter what side of the equal sign, so that's why I moved this over. I personally like to keep p or the x squared term positive, but honestly it doesn't matter. Alright, so we've got A, B, and C, so then we need to plug that into the quadratic formula. So remember that the quadratic formula is going to be x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the next thing that you do is I usually write the formula and then I plug in what I know. So then this is going to be -6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared minus 4 times 5 times c all over 2 times 5. All right, so I've gotten into a habit. I kind of always do it the same way, and then that way it keeps me from making mistakes. So then from this point, the next step that I do is I simplify everything. So negative times -6 is 6 plus or minus, and then what I like to do is figure out what's going to be under the square root. So realize this is -6 squared, so that's -6 times -6, and you want to be careful because if you input it into the calculator as -6 squared, your calculator is going to make this -36, but really it's -6 squared and it's actually +36. So when you key it into the calculator, I suggest you do it this way, and then that way it'll keep you from making, it's a little extra work, but it'll keep you from making a simple mistake. And then so -6 squared minus 4 times 5 times 1 equals, and I get 16. So what ends up happening is this ends up being the square root of, well, I'm not going to write that here. This here ends up being the square root of 16. So what's the square root of 16? 4. And then 2 times 5 is 10. So I kind of always do it this way where I simplify what's under the square root. And then from here, this is a very simple problem because now you have x equals 6 plus 4 divided by 10, or you have x equals 6 minus 4 divided by 10. So then 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 divided by 10 is 1, and then 6 minus 4 is going to be x equals 2 divided by 10. And then you've got to remember we always have to simplify our answer. So 2 over 10, so x ends up being 1 over 5. So my answers, x equals 1 or 1/5. And those are my solutions.